Good morning, everybody. It is great to have you on our webinar this morning. On behalf of Amy Solik, Diane Mack, Sarah Keatley, and I'm Beth Henshaw, we want to thank you for taking part. Today's webinar topic is what is the public's first impression of your fair? And we'll be talking about exhibits to highlight the 4-H program and serving the public in 4-H concession stands. Here on this slide, you can see all the different topics that we will be doing in the future, and the first one that we completed as well. Just a reminder that all of these are archived on the State 4-H website. If you actually go to the website, under What's Hot, a link says County Fair Resources, and there you will find the different resources that we talk about in the webinars. And also, you can actually go back and view the webinar, and the PowerPoint slides are available as well. So just a reminder about why we put this webinar series together. We know that a lot of time and effort goes into county fairs, and so we want to make county fairs the best that they can be across Kansas. We also know that 4-H families often come to the fair to learn about joining the local 4-H program. So we want to make sure that we have our best face forward for those visitors that are coming looking at 4-H as a potential activity for their family. And we also know that county fairs provide fair attendees a glimpse into the health or the vibrancy of your local 4-H program. So again, we want to show what's happening in your 4-H program to any of those people who are attending. So today's topics will be, what is the public's first impression of your fair? Also, exhibits and displays to highlight a vibrant 4-H program, and serving the public in 4-H concession stands. The public's first impression is something to always think about, and we actually have a form that we're going to show you here in just a minute, but the form is designed for someone out of county to complete when visiting your fair. One of the things that we often tell new staff is make sure you visit some surrounding county fairs to get some ideas and see what's going on. So if you know that you have friends from out of county or other extension staff who are visiting your fair, you might consider having them fill this out to help you know what people are seeing for the first time when they come to your fair. And the thing to think about is this is probably how new and potential 4-H families are seeing your county fair as well. So we'll go quickly to the first impressions worksheet. If you've seen some of the things that Community Vitality is doing, they're doing some first impressions work with communities. And this is an example that Nadine Siegel and I worked on. And it's again, like I said, it's designed to be completed by somebody who's coming to your county fair from outside of your community, because they just look at things differently. So you can see there's several different things. You know, what's the pre-fair web search look like? What kind of information can we actually find out about your fair before we ever come to your community? The 5-minute impression, you know, what does 5 minutes of walking around your fairgrounds and just taking it all in quickly, what does that tell us? As people are coming into town, what does downtown or the surrounding area look like as far as fair promotion? Do people in your community know that a county fair is going on? There's also a question about the fairgrounds and how buildings are marked and how easy it is to use the sidewalks, that kind of thing. Inside buildings, inside the barns, what kinds of risk management things that people see, food vendors, events and attractions, commercial exhibits, recreation or tourism, and a wrap up. So anyway, we hope that that might be helpful for you to have somebody else complete that about your fair. And please be willing to do that for other people's fairs as well, because it just gives us an opportunity to learn some new things and to improve.
Okay. Are you, Beth, give me a thumbs up if we're back on the slideshow. Okay. So, you know, it's a bit of a luck of the draw, depending on what unit you are hired on. Obviously, we have facilities and grounds that, you know, cover the spectrum from sort of more shed-like Quonset buildings to very nice, you know, brick air-conditioned buildings. So do the best with what you have. We recognize that a lot of that is out of your control. You kind of sort of inherit that. But with that said, there's a lot that you can do with each scenario you're dealt. So again, keep in mind, you know, each fairgrounds is a little unique in that, you know, the county might own the facilities, the fair board might own the facilities, and so you want to be mindful of property and ownership rights. But what can you do to work with what you have, and how can you make it the most visually appealing? A lot of times we need to keep in mind accessibility for all types of visitors. Seniors may be in wheelchairs or have walkers, moms, dads with strollers. How wide are your aisles or your alleys? And this goes for both inside exhibits and outside. Of course, I have pictures of livestock barns, but these rules apply to inside as well. And gates. And I will tell you, you know, I never really thought about this until it affected me personally, and I started traveling some fairgrounds with kids in tow and in strollers. And you know, it would apply for wheelchairs, crutches, walkers, etc. So obviously, you know, both of these are very real world scenarios. This picture on the left, you know, I've seen it often, but it doesn't necessarily lend itself well to the general public as they're visiting your barns or your grounds. And so you'll want to obviously educate our kids as exhibitors and parents. What can they do to help make those barns and buildings as friendly and welcoming as possible to the general public? So watch out for extension cords, fans, show boxes, sort of that lounge area where kids eventually start hanging out. If they could just keep it tucked in a little bit so that it doesn't look uninviting to maybe the general fair goer. You'll see the picture on the right. You know, the aisle is very clean. It's extremely wide. In this case, it's even, I think, cement. And I know that we don't always have that luxury. But do what you can to sort of keep the shavings and the bedding tidy, and keep those alleys and aisles clear for families, for the elderly, for the general public that's wanting to learn more about 4-H and those particular exhibits. And again, this applies to inside as well. You know, sometimes we cram so many exhibits into a small area and we don't think about, you know, 3 people walking side by side to fit in between tables or display cases. So just something to keep in mind. As you think about how you want to lay out your building, this is an actual sketch of the Edwards County Fair Building from a couple years ago, but I always thought it was really helpful, no matter which county I was in, to sort of have the layout done ahead of time. You can sketch it out. It's actually on graph paper, so it is sort of somewhat to scale. And then you know exactly how many 8-foot tables you can fit. how many chairs, different display cases, what have you, to showcase your items. This is also extremely helpful in the building setup day. You know, I know most folks across the state have a cleanup and a setup day, and it's a bit of a organized chaos. But if you have this and you have copies of it and you can hand it out, it's a much more, I guess, organized chaos than just sort of a free-for-all. And it gives everybody a sort of a visual of where things are going and what corner of the building they can start working on. So I would suggest you can actually Google like graph paper, and I always print it out on an 11 by 17. And then, you know, it does take a little initial time on your end to sort of sketch out if you have a concession stand inside, or like the office, or where the bathrooms are, where the doors are, sort of measure some things out. But then once you have that layout, you can work with it each and every year. I'm noticing questions. Okay.
Sorry, Della, you said you cannot hear anyone. Is everybody else able to hear? Can I get a thumbs up from those of you who have your videos on? Michelle says yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Another item that you want to factor or think about is exhibit building signage, both indoors and outside in the barns. What can you do to spruce up your sort of aesthetic? As the public is walking through your buildings and barns, how can you best explain what they're seeing? So you obviously want to update your signs every so often, make sure they have the proper word marks and branding, make sure they're using the proper terminology. You know, again, we inherit these things, and a lot of times they go used for decades. So at what point is it appropriate to sort of update those? And then, of course, you can use them for several years until they start looking, you know, shabby or outdated. But you want to, these are two examples from the garden and crops photo and the geology, are a good example of how you can better educate the public and just have some sort of interactive educational opportunities as they're, you know, viewing your buildings. The 4-H crops sign is one of the new signs that we created in the last, I think, 3 years at the state fair. Just help better identify the different divisions and departments. This is the one on the left. The poster stand is in the hog barn at the state fair. Again, it uses the new Grow True Leaders campaign, but it also has very user-friendly information on how to join with the website and where they can seek out more information. So again, just, you know, now would be the time. I know, you know, you get busy in May and June, and it's an afterthought come July or August. But if you have some downtime in the winter months, you know, take a look and spend some intentional time thinking about how you can make your signage better. And I will show you at the end of today's webinar a lot of resources, printable resources that we've created for you for just this.
Once you get inside, fair displays are an important thing to consider. So we always want to be looking for a variety of ways that we can display different projects that both display the project to its best advantage, but also make and add visual interest to the overall building. One good opportunity that many county fairs have had is to take advantage when retail stores are closing for discount retail grid, shelves, racks, those kinds of things. And sometimes even when different stores are upgrading, they'll make those available to nonprofit groups. So just always kind of keep your ear out and be watching when you're out shopping so you know if it looks like somebody's making a change that maybe something would be available. Here's a couple of good examples, I think. You can see on the left, that picture, there's some real visual appeal there. And they're using a variety of different kinds of display cases and racks and retail grid and that kind of thing. I think the picture on the right also shows you some retail grid. Retail grid is very adaptable. You can put it together in a myriad of different ways with some zip ties. It's very easy to clip to. That's what you're seeing with these photos here. Retail grid, we use a lot of at the State Fair with clothing, fiber arts, a number of poster displays, visual arts, and it's formed in all kinds of different ways. So definitely something to look into if you're looking for some new ways to display some of your projects. A couple of other things to think about with fair displays is you want to find ways to add height so that you're getting exhibits off a flat surface when possible. So the retail grid, great example, that's bringing things up in the air to look at. But there's a lot of things that we have on tables, so we have to think about how we add some height to those. Some other things, finding ways to represent pre-fair events judging in your displays. There's a lot of times that maybe the horse shows ahead of time, the dog shows ahead of time, or other kinds of things. And how is it that we make sure that that is represented in our 4-H fair building so that people know that that was part of the fair as well? And we also want to consider some educational displays and opportunities in the buildings and the barns. What Amy showed you earlier are great examples of signs that could be inside with those projects. There's no reason why those same kinds of signs couldn't be in a barn as well to explain what's going on in the different projects for our public who's maybe not totally aware of how those projects work. So some of our pictures here, we talked about adding height. If you see that picture of floral exhibits, they've got several tiers there. So they've used a flat table, but they've got several tiers or ways of really raising up some of those different exhibits. And then you can get more exhibits in there as well. As far as some, and I think the exhibit for foods preservation down at the bottom as well shows you an idea of how we can get some things up off the table. They've done a nice job of using those wooden crates there. And then when we're talking about pre-fair events, I think these are some good examples. You can see the picture of the horse and the picture of the dog, and it looks like they've taken pictures of all the different exhibitors that were in those shows that happened prior to the county fair happening. And foods is another one of those things is, you know, how do you show the foods judging or the foods projects? Sometimes that happens before fair. Might be appropriate to use the pictures. We have an example here where they've got the name on the little foam tray, and then they've used a toothpick and a little sticker to show what kind of ribbon that they got on the different products that they made. So again, that would make a nice display as well to actually be able to see what young people made in those project areas. We want to make sure that we have a welcoming environment at our fair, and so sometimes that's adding some decor or some curb appeal. And buildings should be readily identifiable if they have things to see inside. Amy showed you some examples earlier where it talked about 4-H exhibits being inside, but also consider banners and flags or things that are going to draw people or help people immediately know, hey, that's what's inside that building. And then we also want to think about what are the ways that we can spruce up our buildings for some better public image. Some examples might be flowers and hanging plants, using tulle and other fabric, putting tablecloths under certain exhibits, or even using curtains in a background or to cover windows where the sun's coming in really bright into an exhibit building. And I think these are two really good examples. You can see some hanging flowers there. You can see a bench. You can also see some more flowers and a directional sign. Where are we going to find the fair office? A couple of other things about the welcoming environment is, do we have some benches around for people? Usually at the county fair, it's hot and people would like to just sit down and rest for a minute before they go on and see the rest of the fair. So what kind of benches are available? What kind of chairs are available? We also know that everybody has rechargeable devices where they're taking pictures of their kids at the fair and what they're seeing at the fair. And so it's nice to have an opportunity for people to recharge as well. And again, some really great examples. We have some benches for people to sit on at the fair, even welcoming people to the fair. And then the picture on the right, probably many of you remember this from the Kansas State Fair, but we do have a place where people can sit, rest for a little bit before they move on. And there's also a place for kids to do some things and a place to plug in and charge those rechargeable devices.
A couple different ideas to work with your fair boards on to encourage attendance, and how do we sort of capture those potential audiences that we're trying to reach. And so some ideas that I know work across the state pretty well are to have free coffee hours. You know, if folks are generally convening at your co-op or at the pharmacy, you know, maybe they can move that to the fairgrounds for the week if you offer them, you know, a 25-cent cup of coffee or a free coffee hour. Advertise with your local childcare providers. Daycares are really, they love to get out of the house with their kids, and we see it a lot. It's great interaction for the kids, and it's early exposure to the 4-H program. So take advantage of that. Call your senior centers, call your long-term cares or nursing homes, visit with their activities directors, see if they aren't have the ability to arrange transportation for some of their residents to come and spend the day at your fair. And you know, family days, you know, designate a certain day of your fair. Maybe it can coincide with a wristband if you have a carnival, but work with your fair boards to try and identify some of those special events that might bring in some additional foot traffic.
The 4-H concession stand is a mainstay at many of our fairgrounds across Kansas. And I will say, you see the word management there. We will be discussing management of of concession stands in a little more detail on one of our future webinars. But for today, we will share some of the information that we have. Volunteers, you know, scheduling either clubs or other volunteers is really important so that we have the right kind of coverage in the concession stand when we need that. A lot of counties and districts are doing that in a very traditional way. You know, maybe there's always a certain club that has the first shift and another club that has another shift. Some of the examples that I was given, it looks like they've even broken the shifts to smaller time frames, and every club comes once or twice, but then there's more opportunities and it's not quite the same long time to do it. Another possibility is using some of these online scheduling opportunities We've got a couple of counties that are looking into that, signup.com, Sign Up Genius, that kind of thing, because not only can people see what needs, what shifts are available, oftentimes those programs then also send reminders, and so that part is taken over and happens. They can also see how to unschedule themselves or look for other people to work. So if you're struggling with how you're staffing those concession stands, that might be something to look at. As far as the menus, those really vary across the state, and then they also depend on the actual facilities that you have available. We have posted some examples on a resource page, and we'll go there here in a bit so you can see those. We also have a few examples. Amy, if we could go to that page. We have a few examples from some different counties of daily responsibility lists and also procedural kinds of things. So if you look there where Amy has that pulled up, we have menus that different counties are using. We also have a concession stand guide that one of our counties sent, some rules and procedures, the order sheets that they actually use, and then you can see kind of a variety of menus as well. So all of those things are put there so that you can use them. We appreciate the people that have shared them. If your county or district has some things pulled together that would be helpful for others, I would love to have you send those to me, and I will add that to our resource list, because I think it's just nice to not reinvent the wheel, to see what other people are doing and see if you can't start there or get a new idea. When people work in the concession stand, that's often a really great opportunity for 4-Hers, and they often really love that opportunity. But it is important that we think about some sales training for them and some overall training. Young people and adults as well need to know, what is it that I'm going to wear to work in the concession stand? What are the proper shoes? Do we need an apron? Are those provided? Do we wear a hair tie? Do we wear a hat? All of those kinds of things. How do we greet customers? What is the proper way to take orders? And that again varies with all the different concession stands and setups that we have. How is it that we make change? Or what is the procedure for who takes the order and who takes the money at your concession stand? How is the best way to deliver orders to our customers? Always saying thank you to our customers. And then also, how do we deal with it when we've made a mistake and somebody brings that back and points that out to us? What's the best way to handle that? Because those are all really great life skills for our young people to have working in the concession stand. There's a variety of concession stands across the state. As you have the opportunity to remodel and improve your concession stands, check out the options in your communities nearby. You know, what's the county next door? You know, what does their concession stand setup look like? And be thinking about, you know, is there a way that we can paint this to show off that it's 4-H? Or are there some inexpensive banners that we can put up to show that it's 4-H? Just all of those different kinds of things that we always want to signify that it is a 4-H concession stand at the county fair, because a number of people come to the fair and their intent is to support 4-H while they are there.
So what I would like to share is then when we think about concession stands, as Beth was mentioning, is the food safety aspect of it. And there are many great resources out there. So my first resource that I go to is Karen Blakesley. She's the Extension Associate and Rapid Response Center Coordinator. And there's this great website. I don't know if any of you have been on it before, that it's from the Extension Food Safety folks, who also include Dr. Londa Nwadike, and also Gail Price. So those are experts in extension, but this website actually has a page for 4-H events and food safety. And within that page talks about operating temporary food stands. So go ahead and go to the next one, Amy. So on that site is a document from the Kansas Department of Agriculture called Food Safety Fact Sheet, which includes licensing, equipment, location, and construction. One of the things I really wanted to point out to you is about the food sources that you can have in those temporary concession stands. And it says that food prepared in a private home may not be used or offered for human consumption in a food establishment. And also that if you make different meals, that they should be prepared on site or produced in a local commercial kitchen. So if you want to go to that page and reference that, it would be very helpful. Work with your local family consumer sciences agent. She or he will be very helpful to you as well. The other piece we do have is an actual PowerPoint that was created by Denise Sullivan. She was the past Family Consumer Sciences agent in Leavenworth County. And this is actually on the website of resources. So there's the PowerPoint to help all food stand workers kind of know the food safety handling techniques. There's a pre-test and post-test as well. So that's available. Again, here's our contacts for information, including Karen, Londa, and Gail. The other thing I wanted you to consider, and these are some suggestions by Sherilyn, our extension specialist here in the Northeast area, is really looking at healthy menu options. I know most of us think about that, nachos and those types of things, but think about some of those healthy things you could have in the concession stand. Frozen grapes have been really popular that I've heard. There's also, you could do other fruits, watermelons in season at that time, bags of veggies with dips, green cheese. You can offer salads, kind of a lighter menu with protein, and then think about the different things you can do with bottled water instead of just having the option of pop. So Amy, you're going to go back to that page then? Of resources.
Let me stop sharing and then reshare. Okay, so we wanted to show you where all of these resources are located. From the Kansas 4-H homepage, hover over resources, select 4-H library, and then from the 4-H library, you'll select this county fair resource page. Here's the recording of the first webinar in our series. So if you haven't had a chance or weren't able to participate on that day, you can watch the recorded one. Today's recorded webinar will be embedded and linked here next to the PowerPoint slides. A lot of these were referenced at our first webinar, but if you'll scroll down, you'll start to get to some of this week's topics. And we have a section designated for signage. There's project area signs, so mostly inside exhibits. The ribbon explanation signs that were featured at the state fair, we had a lot of requests for those, and those are where that's located. Signs encouraging your parents to sort of allow those kids to be responsible for their exhibit. The 4-H pledge signs, stall cards for all livestock and animal species. There's that first impressions worksheet that Beth mentioned towards the beginning of today. And then here are all those various concession stand related resources. And down here at the bottom are the ones that Diane was just talking about for food safety. There's the PowerPoint that Denise Sullivan had created, and then that pre and post test that I think you'll find very useful when thinking about your food stand or concession stand at the county fair.
All right, at this time, if individuals have questions, you can insert those into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask those questions.
Sarah, I did want to follow up on the comment that Carl Garten made about having business sponsor certain areas, and so that gets them a banner there with their name. It's very possible that businesses will sponsor all kinds of different things at your fair. We talked about, needing to spruce things up, or maybe having chairs or something there. Maybe a business would actually sponsor that. Maybe businesses would actually bring in some plants and flowers to spruce your fairgrounds up. So good suggestion, Carl.
Another comment that Carl made is asking or making sure that 4-Hers do clean up after their animals as they're moving them from their stall to the wash rack or from the stall to the show, so that your alleyways aren't full of manure. So good suggestion there, Carl. Again, if you have questions, you can put those in the chat box. You can access that at the bottom of your screen under the chat icon, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask those questions. And your mute button is on the bottom left-hand corner.
Sarah? The only thing I would add or stress is to really think about the portion of your county fair, and if you had never had any exposure or experience with 4-H, and even for those of you in a larger urban area, you have a potential, tremendous impact on those folks, and an amazing opportunity to educate them, not only what 4-H is, but on all the exhibits and project areas, agriculture, livestock, etc. So really think about it from their lens. I think we get so comfortable with what has always been that we don't always think about what it's like from a new perspective. So, are your buildings easy to access? Are your barns welcoming and inviting, or does it look like a place, that doesn't want foot traffic? Are there, 5 gates into your hog barn that it doesn't look real inviting? So just think about what you can do to make our facilities, and especially the 4-H portion of the fair, as accessible and inviting as possible.
Michelle, did you have a question?
Well, I was just going to make a comment too. As you're looking at, especially for food stand, because a lot of times that does take a lot of volunteers to manage all of that and everything else. We've got 2 things that we do. One, every 4-H family that participates then is eligible for a once-a-year scholarship from 4-H Council, which is some good incentive for them. And whoever the family is, it's the shift manager is responsible for keeping track of that and turning it into the office. And then our office professional keeps track of that throughout the year. And it's $60 toward a state event. So it's some substantial dollars. The other one I was going to mention is our local Farm Bureau board comes in on one night in Russell during the fair, and it's the night that's the livestock auction. There's just a lot of stuff going on that involve a lot of people otherwise. And so there's still a 4-H family or 2 that's the shift managers for that night. But our local Farm Bureau board comes in, and they are actually our workers. So that's a great place to reach out to some local volunteers too. They have been awesome supporters, and it's a great way for them to come out. We try to find a night that's not too hairy for them running all of that, but it works out really well that they were able to step in and do the night of the auction, because that does pull so many of our families away from other things. So just a couple of thoughts.
Great suggestions, Michelle. Carl also has a comment about hand washing areas at the fair. Does anyone want to expand on that?
Sure. He raises a good reminder, not only to provide hand washing areas, but hand sanitizer stations. Make sure your bathrooms all have the proper hand washing signage that they should have. Just, yeah, a good reminder.
Anybody else have any suggestions, questions, comments?
I would just like to reiterate what Beth said and thank those of you out there who are sharing your photos and suggestions, because we appreciate it. It helps everybody learn and see what can happen.